Alright, y'all. Unfortunately, this was a video I wasn't hoping I was having to make, but I knew I was going to probably have to make it at some point. I brought out a shirt I haven't worn in probably legitimately 4 years. This is from the very first edition of When We Were Young, and unfortunately, it was announced today that the festival will not be returning in 2026. They released this, I'm pretty sure, 99% sure it was written by ChatGPT statement saying that they are getting their festival ready for October 2027. We'll actually read through the statement here in just a minute. We're going to talk about kind of the festival and what led up to this and why I kind of thought this was inevitable, and I was actually impressed that it made it this far at this point anyway. But going over this real quick, like this whole situation, in summary, kind of, in previous years, they would have the festival. It was the third weekend in October, like the weekend before Halloween, typically. The year I went on weekend 2. That was the only year I had a second weekend, and it was actually Halloween weekend because I remember coming home and trick-or-treating, like the next day, or having trick-or-treaters, I should say. So it was like the weekend before Halloween, essentially, like the 23rd or the 22nd or 21st, like kind of around that range of time. And they had it all 4 years, 22, 3, actually I think 5, right? No, 22, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 20, so 4 editions. Third year was the albums only, which we'll talk about. We're going to kind of go through every year and kind of review what led up to this. But immediately after this year's festival, they did not reveal what dates would be used for 2026. So that was kind of a first red flag, because usually either when you went to the festival, you would see that it was being advertised for next year's dates already, or what they would do is they would start to like roll it out on social media over the next week. They'd be like, hey, we had a great festival this year. By the way, here are next year's tickets opportunities already. So when that didn't happen, that was like kind of already a red flag. And then with the Sick New World situation of them adding a second date this year in Texas on that same weekend, people were kind of drawing the conclusion that that was going to be a temporary replacement of When We Were Young. So for people who don't know, I'll pull up Sick New World real quick. But Sick New World added I should say, let's start at the beginning. So Sick New World is a festival that takes place in both Las Vegas and Texas. Now, 2 years ago, I believe this festival started in 2023. Yeah, 23. This was only this date in Vegas in April. I believe there should be a place, I was hoping, on their website, maybe not, to see past years. I can look it up though real quick. It's not going to take too long. So 2023. This should kind of pull up hopefully every year. Yeah, we can kind of pull up from here. So that's Wikipedia. I don't want that. So this works. So this is kind of the first year, 2023. System of a Down, Korn, Deftones, Incubus. You got some other bands on here. Evanescence, Papa Roach, Turnstile, Chevelle. You know, this was a very new metal themed leaning festival, especially year one. And it was kind of meant as a counterpoint alternative, you know, exploring a similar vein to When We Were Young, but maybe for a little bit different of a demographic. And it was super successful in year one. I believe it sold out. I don't think they added a second day, but I believe it sold out like the first day. This was 2020. This is not 2024. Where is 2024? This is 2024. And it was a little... Of course, this is Google not helping me out here. Let's see if it's only the top. Oh, no, it's down here. All right. So this was in 2024. A little bit earlier, actually. I believe the first year is, May 13th. So they moved it up to the April weekend in the second year. This was when they had System again, but they had Slipknot, Bring Me the Horizon, Alice in Chains, Perfect Circle, Bad Omen, Sleep Token, Lamb of God, Knocked Loose. So a little bit different of a lineup, but still kind of thematically kind of there. It grabbed a little bit newer of an audience. It had some stuff for the older people as well, but it wasn't quite as kind of new metal rooted. It kind of filled a need, but it didn't sell as well. So the next year they sold, or they were, what time was I in? The next year they announced a lineup for 2025 that had, famously anyway, Metallica and Linkin Park, right? And honestly, I really like this lineup. I thought this was pretty solid. It was a little weird, but I thought it was pretty good. It is just like kind of all over the place, but there's less bands here. There's definitely less bigger bands. The fall off between, like, you got Metallica and Linkin Park obviously are your big like headliners. The idea behind it was your big headliners anyway. Then you have Queens of the Stone Age, Evanescence, decently big bands. I would say 311 is kind of in that vein, and 3 Days Grace is maybe like, a slight step down. But then you go down to like AFI, Ministry, Gojira, although Gojira is closing a stage at Louder Than Life this year, so maybe, maybe what do I know? But you don't have a lot of big time names up here after that. It kind of falls off, although I see the Mastodon's kind of buried down here. Again, like the fall off from the top to the bottom is a big deal, or is kind of stark. And the reason for that being, as far as it's rumored anyway, that the booking fee for Metallica and Linkin Park was about $5 million each, which ate a lot of the budget for them booking lower tier talent. Now, is this lineup really that much worse than the one that they came back with? No, probably not. But 2025, they don't have system. They don't sell. The festival's not selling. They end up canceling it. But when they announced the comeback in here, this is 2026's lineup, right? So you notice April 25th, same weekend, same location for this event anyway. You got System, Korn, Bring Me the Horizon, Evanescence. Again, I don't think this lineup is really even that much better than the one that got canceled. It is, but it's not that much of a difference, to be honest, in terms of consistency and quality. Now, Texas, on the other hand, is insane, in my opinion. You got Slayer, you got The Prodigy, you have Deftones, who I think are better than Korn. So, I mean, that might just be a personal preference, but this lineup is better, but you can tell that it's also a little bit more expensive too. I think Slayer versus Bring Me the Horizon is more expensive. Deftones versus Korn is probably more expensive. Might not be, but that's my perception of things. Anyway, the big point in bringing this up is that the date is October 24th, 2026, and it is in Texas. And these shows, typically, these two festivals share crews. They share organizers, the people who put it on. They probably share a lot of ground crew in terms of like artist relations and people who are helping on the ground on the days of the actual festivals themselves and putting them on. So the idea that they were going to have enough personnel to handle both the festival in October in a different state that same weekend in two different states, two different places essentially at the same time, catering to two completely different audiences, was probably far-fetched to begin with. So this was one of those signs that the festival was probably going away for this year. When we were young, now we're going to shift back to when we were young. So talking about when we were young again, I need to get rid of all these tabs real quick. So now if we move on to when we were young, so this was the statement. We'll go back to last year. So we can actually start probably... Well, we can start with last year. We can kind of go in reverse. That was not what I wanted to do. That was 2025 or 2026. So for 2025, I think a lot of people already were like, hey, this festival's probably not coming back. But they do pull kind of one last trick out of the bag anyway. And you pick Panic at the Disco, who are hometown. They're from Vegas originally. So it's something new that can kind of draw people to the festival. And also, they don't perform anymore. They technically retired from touring in 23, whenever their last album came out. They did a tour for their most recent album as of this point, their final album, because the project is supposedly retired. And then they went inactive for 2 years, no announcements, nothing prior. This festival gets announced and it's like, whoa, what's happening? Like, they're doing a performance, they haven't performed in a long time. It does one day and doesn't really sell. It takes a while. It's like 2 or 3 months probably before the second day gets announced, which is not the first time this happened, because it happened the year prior in 2024. Nope, not 3, 4. In 2024. In 2024, it was themed after albums. So, let's do this real quick. I didn't want to do that, actually. Well, you can see this is plays the album set. So it has the advertisements, all these different albums. You had bands playing out full albums front to back throughout the entire weekend. Now, there was some controversy around this because there are some bands that weren't told ahead of time or weren't scheduled long enough sets to actually play their full album. Like this Coheed album over here, Coheed and Cambria album, Good Apollo and Burning Star Volume 4 Volume 1, is like 90 minutes long. It's actually a double album, and it's got a lot of really long songs on it. So they only scheduled them for like a 40-minute set. So they ended up playing a few songs off this album, played like Welcome Home, The Suffering, 10 Speed, a couple other songs, but then they also played like Blood Red Summer. They also played Favor House Atlantic. Like they threw in the older stuff too. I believe Dashboard did the same thing. They played like the Dusk and Summer, but they also played like Hands Down. I'm pretty sure. If you look at a lot of these like set lists, like I believe Sleeping with Sirens still played. I'm trying to think. I don't know why I can't think of something. If You Can't Hang, there's a few on here that was still played. The Used played some stuff off their first album. A Day to Remember, I think, was purely Homesick. Pierce the Veil, I think, was also purely Collide with the Sky. But no, we don't need to get too fixated on that right now. We can actually pull up the full album list really quick as well. But this was kind of the first year that they had struggled to move, right? So this was a different gimmick, at least. You could kind of... This is really hard to read. This is at least a different gimmick. Maybe this one will show up a little bit better. So like you can see, you have... The gimmick is all these bands are going to play full albums, right? So this was a risky move, and it kind of hinges on how a lot of people feel about these albums. For the most part, I think that they got a lot of the albums right for bands like My Chemical Romance. Obviously, they're doing a tour behind the Black Parade now that's sold out like 2 straight years, stadium-level venues. Day to Remember, Homesick makes sense. Jimmy Eat World, Bleed America makes sense. Pierce the Veil, Collide with the Sky, as much as I prefer Selfish Machines. That makes a lot of sense. But then you have it's Simple Plan too, right? But then you have like Dashboard Confessional, Dusk and Summer, not the album that I would primarily associate with them as far as like their best songs or a couple of their biggest hits, but not the most memorable stuff, in my opinion, or the most like signature album to them. Same with The Used, right? And Love and Death's an alright album. It's pretty good, but definitely their first album is the one that I think more people have kind of fondly associated memories with. Same with All American Rejects. Now, I think the first album is their best album, but Move Along is probably the one that has more resonating memories for people. So it kind of, as you go down this list, it's like, okay, some of these make sense, some are a little weird, but it really like depends on if you're an album person. So for like a lot of these ones, as you get further down, right, if you don't know a lot of these bands, or they have like a couple songs off of different albums, like The Maine, I would say is a band like that, right? The Wonder Years, I would say is a band like that, where I don't necessarily even like think of them from album perspective. I just think like, okay, they got a couple songs here, a couple songs here that I like. Motion City Soundtrack's another one like that too. And Dance Gavin Dance, I can't believe I skipped over that. They're not a band with like a signature album to me. So it kind of comes and goes based on how you feel about that. But this was originally announced for one day, and they couldn't sell a second day for like a really long time. Oh, by the way, Fall Out Boy did not do that. That's one thing worth mentioning. They were like the big band of this kind of scene that hadn't headlined yet. So first year you had Paramore, MCR. Second year was Blink and Green Day. And then this year they did MCR again and Fall Out Boy. Because Fall Out Boy was kind of like the band everybody was asking for to headline that hadn't done so yet. So that's one thing worth noting there as well. Now with this, obviously, like I said a couple times already, they didn't really sell that well. As you can see here, when it got announced, it was only one day. It took them a while to add a second day. So like here you can see this, well, this was a little bit later because this was after the AAR controversy when Set Times came out. But this is when they added a second. They had already added a second day by the time that it actually came about. So one more time, just going back through 2023, since we did this in reverse order, this was a skate punky kind of lineup more so, I think, without having like a better way to describe that. It was a different audience from the first festival. So you have like I said, Green Day, Blink-182, Good Charlotte, Sum 41, Simple Plan, Newfound Glory. This was not as much on the like pure emo side as much it was like more punky, like kind of like I said, skater vibes, right? And you got a lot of, like those type of bands. You also have like what I would also call like prep school emo with a Motion City Soundtrack, Reliant K. Say Anything is its kind of own thing, right? But like Tiger's Jaw, Phoenix TX. There's, I think MXPX is on here somewhere. I know like Saves the Day. These are all bands that I remember from when I was skateboarding. Like these are like the older kids that show me this. And then you got like your ska. You got like Goldfinger and Less Than Jake. So, this served a different audience than the first one. So this was highly successful too. This sold out the first day, like in a few days. Like this was, it went on sale, sold out, was really successful. Not as successful as the first year, but kind of justified it. But when you do this, you kind of like, as you can kind of see, like you're burning through a lot of your bands when you did this lineup. versus Year One, if we pull that up real quick, which this is still, in my opinion, the best single-day festival lineup that probably ever existed. If we can pull it up right now. I think this is actually before the third day was added, but I did it to me again. I hate Google Images does this stuff. We should pull this one up because I think they had a slightly different lineup weekend 1 to weekend 2. Like, I don't believe A Lot of Dispute was there when we saw them because one of the people I went with, that's their favorite band, and they didn't get to see them. But we'll look at this real quick. It's going to show up. Yeah, all right, cool. So this was the very first lineup. Like I said, goated, absolute god tier. Oh, Car Seat Headrest also wasn't there. I don't think Wolf Alice was there on weekend 2 either. If they were, I don't remember them being there. But this was like so strong that you like had to really pick between groups, and it created a lot of conflicts, especially for me. Like, I remember a lot of missing out on a lot of bands that I still wanted to see, and I think I saw like 15 sets that day. But between this lineup and, if I can pull it up, where's the option for? I'm trying to figure out where everything is. This is definitely off the cuff. I was not planning on making this video, so there is split view. All right, and I'll move myself into the middle for a second. So as you can kind of see, like, if you're just taking a look at the headliners, like, or the main card talent, now you have Pierce the Veil on both this side. I don't know where I am. Whoops. You have Pierce the Veil on this side, and they're also on this side as well. But I believe other than that, I don't think there's like any overlapping artists. I don't know if that's 100% true. I'm just trying to do like a quick glance to see. But I know for a fact it was like Pierce the Veil played every year the first 3 years. It was actually like a surprise that they didn't in 2025 for a lot of people. But I believe that was when they were doing their like Eras tour, the I Can't Hear You tour that they just did. But when you're burning through headliners like this, like, it's hard to really integrate new bands and cover the same ground and get people to actually go, because this is in Vegas. It's not like there's a huge supporting metro area population. Like, for example, take like Riot Fest in Chicago. Riot Fest in Chicago could probably succeed without the support of travelers, because it's in an area that has strong like punk roots and a big local scene, and also is like the third most populous city in the United States in general. So on top of the fact that it has that type of audience as well, it makes sense that they could do that without having to have the travel. Now, Vegas has the infrastructure for travel to begin with, but you still need to give people a reason to actually go. So the sustainability long term of this festival probably wasn't the highest to begin with, right? You had a ceiling you were going to hit eventually. And the fact that they were able to add a fourth year after doing the album gimmick in year 3, honestly, I really commend, because when I looked at this, I thought they were dead after year 3. When they did the albums, I was like, okay, this is going to be it, and this is when they're going to take a break. Because in theory, in my mind anyway, this festival does work in a rotational format where you do, okay, this year, like this first year was just get everybody, like as many bands as we can. Just going to be emo, absolute, like everybody's just happy with everybody here. I think Death Cab actually played when I saw them too. I don't think Avril Lavigne was there, but we're gonna go all out. We got My Chemical Romance, right? Holy Grail. We got Paramore, right? Probably the most popular band in terms of mainstream appeal in the genre or adjacent genres, right? Bring Me the Horizon, Day to Remember, super well liked along the younger fan base for sure. And Avril Lavigne still maintains a very influential, very popular base. Bright Eyes, I don't really know. And Jimmy Eat World, they're kind of popular enough. They're a name that people recognize, maybe don't know the most of. But then you have all these bands that people who probably listen to these type of bands will also know too, right? And then you got your older stuff. You got like All American Rejects. You got Boys Like Girls. That has more of a crossover audience with people who don't necessarily listen to this type of music, to appeal to them too. But then you have like your AFI and the U's from more like your hardcore listeners. Taking Back Sunday, Dashboard, same kind of thing. Like, and then you still have your newer stuff too, right? Like Pierce the Veil, I Prevail, Emotionless in White, Black Veil Brides, Ice Nine Kills, Knock Loose. I was like, I know Knock Loose is over here somewhere. And then you also got, again, older stuff too. Mayday Parade, Census Fail, Silverstein. These guys are a little bit older. But Sleeping with Sirens is another one too. I don't think I talked about them earlier. But you have a wide array, but also like a lot of people will like a lot of these bands. Like these tastes overlap more so. Same thing with this lineup on the right here. Like, most of the people who like your headliners are going to like a lot of the bands that are down the card, and even if they don't, there's a lot of kind of specialized interests too. So like I said, you got some ska stuff down here, you got some little bit newer stuff, you got some kind of preppy stuff. You got a lot of newer groups here too, actually. Like, I didn't even notice the first time. It's like Front Bottoms are here, Joyce Manor, Beach Bunny. Like, it's not just as much of a nostalgia trip. But like I said, they were able to pull out the gimmick for this last year, right? You get Panic, you get Blink, or you get Panic for the first time, right? You're gonna bring back Blink. I'm gonna move myself back over. So, that's kind of good. Kind of helps out for sure. But then Weezer was another group that hadn't played before, so that added something too. I'm not really thinking they probably had a huge draw or anything like that, but still something worth noting. Other than that, I think almost all these bands probably either played before or weren't going to be a big enough deal to get new people to kind of come to the festival. So you kind of stretched out your last year of this, but at the same time, like I said, I can kind of commend them for being able to pull out something like that to justify a fifth year or fourth year. Fourth year. That's that. With them taking the year off, I actually think this is probably the best thing for the festival. So we'll just read through this real quick. It was clearly written by ChatGPT. But the songs, the memories, the moments, none of it exists without you. After an unforgettable run in Las Vegas, we've decided to take 2026 off to give this festival the care it deserves and to make sure what comes next feels just as special as what came before. When We Were Young Festival will return to Las Vegas in October 2027. So probably no Sick New World Texas 2027. That's my first read on that. But, sorry, we'll keep going. Thank you for showing up with your whole hearts every year. This isn't goodbye. It's just a pause. We'll see you in 2027. So a few things that I kind of picked up on from reading this. One is we will return to Las Vegas in October 2027. That was something I picked up on, flagged that, right? But it also says after an unforgettable run in Las Vegas. So this is my kind of thought process or potential theory that I'm spitballing here. I talked a couple minutes ago about how I think this would work in a rotational format, right? Like, you have either a theme year, like, okay, this is what we're doing this year, and they kind of tried that with the albums, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna do albums. Not necessarily the best idea, in my opinion, but at least it showed that they were willing to try something. But when I say rotational format, I also mean, like, we can do this festival maybe every 2 or 3 years and have a super strong lineup that people aren't, like, burnt out on or over kind of exposed to, right? And it'll work, right? Like, we can draw that audience again every 2 to 3 years. It would make a lot of sense, but it just doesn't necessarily work if we're going to do it every year. One, to try and refresh the acts, keep it fresh, draw people here. If we're not able to pull off a Panic at the Disco level move where people will literally travel out of state from all across the country, spend all this money, and be able to show up just because they're like, I don't know if I'll ever see this again. Another thing to mention with Panic, too, is they played Fever. Fever You Can't Sweat Out, their debut album in its entirety. I don't think they played majority of the songs off that album in several years, if not, like, over a decade of their last, like, existence. I saw them, I think, 4 times while they were still together, and I think I probably only heard, like, 4 songs off of Fever in my entire time seeing them. The last time I saw them, he only played I Write Sins. Actually, I think the last 2 times they played, I only played I Write Sins. So for some people who really like that album, same thing with the album's concept before, if you really liked that album specifically and not even just Panic, then that was worth the travel for you probably too. And then on top of that, he pretty much played a full set of greatest hits. So you're kind of getting like 2 different sets, but again, it's just like, that's a spectacle. That's something that's a draw for people to bring them there. And if you're not capable of doing that move, I actually think it makes a lot of sense. Second part of that, I was going to say, could we see When We Were Young in Vegas and Texas, or a second location? It doesn't necessarily have to be Texas, but this is my thought process, right? If it's returning to Las Vegas in October 2027, let's say you do Sick New World is in April, right? It's like a month away, or 2 months away technically at this point. 2 months away, almost exactly to the day, in April, right? And then you have When We Were Young in October the next year. Then you do Sick New World the next year. Then you do When We Were Young the next year. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Texas might not necessarily be the location for When We Were Young. I could see somewhere like, they probably won't do it in D.C. necessarily because they already have Warped Tour. They might not do it in Chicago because I don't think they're going to have a big enough spot to do it. But if they can find another location that's in an area that has this more of a type of audience, and is capable of hosting that size of a festival and getting people to travel there, has travel infrastructure, and it makes a lot of sense for people to go. I actually think that makes a lot of sense for this festival. You can do 2 shows every other year, and it works. I really think it's like a almost foolproof idea. So that's something that I kind of picked up on from the phrasing. Now, realistically, it's probably just somebody didn't look it over, or they didn't look into it that much, and I'm overlooking into it. But I'm after them adding a second Sick New World date, despite the fact it failed in 2025 and had to be canceled. I'm willing to bet that there's probably a second When We Were Young date on the horizon in the future, even if it's not going to be in 2027. It could be in 2028. Who knows? We'll see. But I think that's pretty much it. I went on a lot longer than I thought I was going to, but I do think that this is a good move for the festival overall. I think that they had a good run, right? I went in 2022, had an absolute blast. There was some complaints. It was a little small. The navigation wasn't the best. I know those are issues that they didn't really address over the years either. I'm sure on days where it wasn't as crowded, it probably worked. But like I said, the first year when I went, it literally sold out 3 days, like immediately. So I have a little bit different of an experience as it comes to that. But anyway, just wanted to pay a quick tribute. Big moment for my life going to this festival. I thought this was a really important festival, but I understand why it can't be a yearly thing, and it for the betterment of like the community, the emo community, and also the festival scene too. It's probably better that this takes a year off. So it's a little bit sad to see, but I'm excited to get some news about what goes on next year, and I'm looking forward to Sick New World this year. So for me, it kind of works, and I think the Warped Tour lineups this year are really strong too. That's another thing I didn't really talk about a whole lot because it doesn't factor into as much of the narrative as we thought it was going to when it came back. But Warped Tour coming back probably did market correct a little bit, although it is like a second tier festival. More people can justify the price tag, and it's a 2-day festival, right? You pay like $200, $250. I don't know how much the California one is, but like Warped Tour is a little bit better of a value price wise for what you're actually getting versus paying like $400, $450, $500 for one day. Even though the talent is a little bit higher end, I would say. I don't think you're ever going to see like the type of band that headlines Warped Tour, right? Like when I went to Orlando, your closers were Falling in Reverse, MGK, A Day to Remember, and All Time Low. Like on your 2 main stages, because I count both main stage headliners, right? Like if you look at 2022, which I still think is the best lineup. I already had it open. I don't know why I did all that. But 2022, like A Day to Remember is fourth on the list here, and Bring Me the Horizon would probably now at the profile they're at, they would never close. They would never perform at a Warped. There's not even a shot. But Pierce the Veil is probably even too big. Actually, I was gonna say that they could probably do it, but maybe not. But that's the type of you're taking a clear step down. You're never gonna see a band like of this caliber at a Warped, and that is a niche that When We Were Young does provide, because I do think a lot of people will probably be willing to pay. One thing that I'm looking at it that they could probably do, and it'll never happen, but maybe if they got Paramore to come out of retirement, that would be When We Were Young 2027. I don't think they do it, but just an option. Just the type of spectacle thing that would maybe make it work. But, that's a whole other story right now. Anyway, I've talked enough. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And RIP When We Were Young.